I think a little while ago, especially with all the drama around GameStop and, a lot of the buzz, people were like, oh, it's going to drop off. It's going to drop off, but it's not. In fact, retail investors are now hold 53% of investments. It used to be like institutions. Yeah. And
from scrappy founders to 8-figure success stories, we're busting startup myths, getting raw insights from market-tested entrepreneurs, and revealing the proven playbook for bootstrapping your B2B startup to 5 million. This is the Startup Different podcast. Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of the fabulous Startup Different. I am Dave, he is Chris, and today we have a special guest, Jane Crowell. Jane, how are you? Welcome to the program.
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's a freezing cold day out in the East Coast in Halifax. So, living winter life out by the ocean.
As you say, nice and chilly out there. I actually love Halifax. It reminds me a lot of my hometown, fabulous Kingston, Ontario, the limestone city. It's got a similar vibe, but I love like the fortress. Like there's a huge fort in the middle of Halifax, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's how we keep all the Ontario folk out. I'm kidding. We love our Toronto. I'm kidding. We love our Torontonians. In fact, I moved here from Toronto about 7 years ago, so it didn't work on me.
I have to call out your very strong about. That was an East Coast about. If I've ever the boot, I've heard that one before. That's fantastic. It's funny when I used to do calls with folks in the United States or whatever. People would be like, "Are you from like North Dakota or like Minnesota?" I'm like, Canada. They're like, "Oh yeah, that's the one." Anyway, so good times. Well, thanks for joining us, Jane. Obviously, so we've done your intro. Lots of success working big banks and kind of obviously the sort of venture capital, like sort of fundraising background. Let's talk about your journey. Why don't you tell people who you are and how you got here to be on our fabulous program today?
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. You have an amazing audience, and I love your book. So, I feel pretty lucky to be here. So when I started, my career started in the digital marketing space. This is way back when we didn't even call it social media. We called it word of mouth, which nobody knew what it meant. Perhaps I'm aging myself a little bit, but we started off in digital marketing because that was really huge at that time. And one of my big loves in life is automotive. From that, I was able to translate it into a long career in automotive, working both on the client side and also as a consultant in this strategic marketing and operations space. But when I moved out east here about, sorry, I said about again.
That's good. Extra points.
Extra
every
points
time you
for
say
that.
about, where's the gong? Can we hit the gong every time? All right.
There is a really strong tech community here. It's a very strong startup scene. I don't know if the rest of Canada really kind of puts that pieces together, but we have a huge push here and a huge community to start apps to help support startups, to help fuel that growth. So getting here and kind of was a good chance for me to reinvent myself and reinvent my career and start something different. And I personally believe you're never too old to take an adventure. And the second part of it, you should always take the adventure. So kind of hopping into this, I thought I'd switch it up and really embrace this community we have around here and just use my talents and see what I can, do up and how I can create something. So it's really through kind of breaking the hamster wheel of living downtown Toronto that made me encounter this opportunity and be open to it.
Hey, Dave here. Let me tell you a little secret. When we were building App Armor, we needed to move fast, especially with quotes and invoicing. FreshBooks made that possible. Yeah, this is an ad, but seriously, FreshBooks was essential. My sales team could send sharp quotes in minutes, and it automatically handled millions in invoices and reminders. No chasing, no stress, just cash flowing in. It was so easy to get paid. It's built for small businesses by folks who get it. And yeah, like us, they're Canadian. What's not to like? If you want to spend less time on paperwork and more time growing your business, head to freshbooks.com and start your free trial. Trust me, it's a game changer. And now, back to the show. That's really cool. So you kind of wanted to get away from the hamster wheel is a bit aggressive, but I understand your point. You know, kind of looking for a way to be the master of your own sort of like destiny.
For sure.
And so let's go in more into your business here.
For sure. So my business is Particle. You know, simply put, it connects companies to capital to help fuel their growth. And we do that directly from the private markets in US and Canada. And we use Reg A, Reg CF, and Reg D to help facilitate that capital raise. We do it online, but more so than just like an investor checkout process, we actually help find companies, investors, retail investors that are really looking for these kind of opportunities and connect them to help facilitate capital for, you know, all the fun things you need to do to run a company. I know, like, even from my own personal experience with my previous startup, you know, finding, hunting, searching for capital was always something that took away way more time than I ever thought it would take. And it kind of prohibited me in a lot of ways from doing what a true founder's role is, which is, you know, keep the lights on, keep the love alive.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're lucky, be profitable. So, you know, so based on that journey, I really wanted to create a system where I can help other founders help alleviate the pressure of finding capital by automating it and giving them like new ideas on how to be able to source that capital in a really efficient, cheaper, faster way.
That's interesting because I think so Chris and I, just calling a spade, Chris and I aren't the biggest fans of venture capital, at least for the SaaS market, you know, software as a service, kind of that. We have a software product. We're trying to get it out to the world. It does something valuable. Maybe like in our case, we were enterprise. So we were working with higher education institutions. And we just didn't feel like we needed the capital. But I will just say that's one piece. The second thing, though, is that this idea that it's a full-time job to get capital, I think is really interesting because it absolutely is. So it's not that we didn't always try. You know, we looked around, right? Chris, you remember some of those presentations?
Like we sort of did, but it did take a long time,
right?
And we kind of half-heartedly did it, and it felt like it took a long time.
Well, I think what we did is we half-heartedly went into it, and then we saw like the amount of work it was going to be, and I think Chris and I just turned to each other and said, "Let's just go get more deals. Like, forget this. Like, you know, because in our case, again, we didn't really like per se need the capital. We were selling air. You know, there's no software warehouse per se. It doesn't get driven to the customer. We don't have to ship it there. You know, there's no packaging. Yeah. Like it's very different.
That's kind of where I'd like to ask is like, what is the makeup of your typical, you know, the organization, the startup that's coming to Particle to get capital? What do they look like? That's like the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, what are they saying they're going to do with the money? Can you give us some insight on that?
Absolutely. A lot of our clients are high intensity capital clients. They need capital, particularly for their to actually launch and to grow their company. For example, if you're in real estate and you want to start fractionally, you know, get retail investors to come in on a fractional basis to support, for example, student housing, a condo development, a retail development. This is a massive capital outlay. So I think the capital is definitely being used to facilitate that. Other clients could be forming, you know, need capital for manufacturing, EV batteries, their oil, mining, you know, other alternative assets that are capital intensive, and they require, unlike, you know, your amazing business, which was air, they have to buy.
It was not air.
Have you ever seen
I put my blood, sweat, and tears into
that code?
Yeah, so it was not air.
Have you ever seen the movie? Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie? Here's a reach. Have you ever seen the movie Spaceballs, where he opens the drawer because their world is so polluted? He opens the drawer to his desk and there's cans of air. And he's like, Okay. Anyway.
Here's a trick question for you guys. What was the passcode on his luggage?
Oh, Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It's also
that unlocked the shield around the planet that let them suck up the air. But then the emperor is like, oh, that's the password of my luggage. You know? Yeah, anyway, yeah.
And it might be the password to your email. So now we all know.
I can't. Yeah, no, I do it back. I put an exclamation mark at the end.
Oh, that solves everything.
Okay, hang on. Like, we got it. That's a good gong-worthy moment too. How often do people know Spaceballs? Like, that's incredible. Anyway, okay, where were we? I'm so sorry for hijacking that. So these are capital-intensive business. Capital-intensive business. Yes. Okay.
And it can work for other businesses as well, because the different securities exemptions, they have different amounts you can raise with. So you can even do a smaller amount through a Reg D. You don't necessarily need to do a mini IPO or go to a huge number with a Reg A. Sometimes you just may need a bridge, almost like a bridge loan. You need some bridge financing to go from point A to point B. So you can certainly raise a smaller amount, but it just depends what your need is. I would also say, like, particle could be an addition to already what you would consider your funding model to be. So, you don't necessarily need to throw everything out and just go with this one solution. This can also be helpful as an addition to like investment banking or as an addition to what you're doing right now.
Right.
I mean, my goal is to make it easier. And the way I want to make it easier is through automating the whole process with a little bit of air and a little bit of code and putting it together. So it becomes, for people like me who had to go through that struggle, had to go through the grind, solve that critical problem to free them up to do all the amazing things founders need to do. And as a parent, I would even include that amazing things founders have to do is, give back time so they can go out and spend time with their families who are all wondering why they're working all night in the first place.
Yeah.
Jane,
go ahead.
Maybe I could ask a quick question. So, Jane, we talk a lot about that when you're raising funding, the cost of that funding. So, if you remember your MBA days, the WACC, the weighted average cost of capital, that type of thing. And sometimes I listen to some startup founders, and they're talking about they got a great idea, great product, they got traction, and they're out there looking for investors. And I sometimes sit there and I think, like, why don't you go get like a loan or a line of credit or something like that? Where do you guys fall in that, cost of capital? Are you more like an investor in the business, or is it like a loan with like an interest rate that you're going to pay back? How do you guys land?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So what we do is we help provide and facilitate a company being able to use the U.S. Securities exemptions to raise money in the U.S. private markets, and we can also do the same in Canada. So it is an equity fundraise, and we with retail investors, but we can also target accredited investors, specifically when it comes down to Reg D. And we can also help facilitate that investment through funds and family offices as well.
So, cool. You kind of do it at all those different levels. You kind of have all the options for the businesses looking to raise capital.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is also, like, to my previous experience, like in the capital markets as well. The retail investors right now are growing. I think a little while ago, especially with all the drama around GameStop and, a lot of the buzz, people were like, oh, it's going to drop off. It's going to drop off, but it's not. In fact, retail investors are now hold 53% of investments. It used to be like institutions. Yeah. And
awesome.
That's insane, right? And on top of that, it's projected for the next couple of years to grow to a few more $1 trillion of that.
Wow.
And
that's insane.
It is insane. But when you think about the market and where it's going right now, there's like a hunger for it because the predictions for, the regular capital markets are so abysmal. Back in October, Goldman Sachs published a report where, well, I'm going to actually use this as a pop quiz. Maybe you guys know.
Oh boy.
Maybe I can do the gong now. What is your guess on what Goldman Sachs predicted the S&P 500 annualized return over the next 10 years? Best guess.
Wow. What isn't it? It's historically, I want to say like 6 to 10%.
Yeah, I want to say 6.
So I feel like let's go with 7.32%.
I'll go.
Okay.
Is this Price is Right?
Yeah, it's
rules?
Price is Right.
Price is Right. I'll take the closest one.
Like, if you go over, that doesn't count, right? Like,
Right.
So I'll go $1.
$1.
Well, the one closest to it is actually the $1 because so historically it has done 15-16%. But
I was way off on that.
Oh yeah,
maybe I think of the market in general. Maybe not because like S&P 500 is a higher growth rate normally, right? Anyway, whatever.
It is, but now it's predicted to be only 3% annualized return over the next 10 years.
What?
Yeah,
it's terrible.
Sure. It is terrible. So a lot of people out there who are savvy, who are on Robinhood, who have taught themselves all these kind of things, who now want to be a part, are looking for ways to invest in companies that make sense to them. And retail investors, they tend to, invest in something that means something to them. So for example, like use an Apple product, you may want to, invest in Apple. You watch Netflix, you may be interested in Netflix. So some of these other alternative assets, they may just have like a deep interest in it or really want to support it. It could be robotics, it can be space, it can be EV technology. And whatever they're putting in, they're likely going to do better than 3%. So they're really looking for that. And alternative assets.
Factor inflation into that 3%, you're probably only seeing
nothing. You're seeing
essentially nothing.
You're netting out.
You're just saving.
Yeah, you're just saving. Maybe. You're like putting it under your mattress.
Yeah.
Actually, it'd be better than that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Sure. It is interesting, and I think the second part of that is that as Canadian companies, we may not know that we can participate in the U.S. private markets, and that maybe goes to our more of our Canadian mentality, being more conservative. But we know what the productivity rates for Canada are. We all know what's happening in Canada when it comes down to innovation. So there is a whole new market that's accessible there in the U.S., and I don't think a lot of Canadian companies understand or see the route to get there. And that's something Particle can help with.
That's fascinating because, my understanding, I actually wrote something a while ago. I want to say for like Canadian online business or something like that. That was about how Canada sort of swings like below its weight class when it comes to venture capital, or like, I think it's at least like corporate venture capital. I'm going to say, I don't know all the terms in the same way as you do, Jane. You're obviously like such an expert in this, but I never really considered the idea that you could have, a business in Canada, but pursue funding south of the border, because that, I guess for the Americans as well, you think about the currency like conversion there too. They're getting a 30% discount ish, or if not more, depending on the time. On whatever investment they make. So for them, that's got to seem like reasonably appealing. You can get a deal sort of thing. Do you see a lot of that? Like, are you mostly raising funds in the United States?
Yes, we are at this point. Yes, absolutely.
And it's always these like, or most of the time it's, I find this really interesting too. That's these retail investors too. So like just a caveat here too. So it's let me just based on what you just said. So most of them are going to be American, like people, actually just Americans that are investing in these like companies that they like for whatever reason. And like on the average deal, how many, like what percentage of it is retail investors? Like, do you have like 10,000 retail investors putting in, I don't know, $1,000 each, something like that? Like, how does this?
That's a good question. So just to give you some stats on that, like in terms of like equity fundraising, if you through Reg A, that in itself has already accounted for, in the first half of 2024, $90 million from everyday investors. And I wish I could say I did it all, because I didn't, but that's the first half of it.
Jane did it.
I did it all by myself.
Thank you.
You're
Get
welcome.
The gong. Wong. Very nice.
So there is a need for this, certainly. Depending on which regulation you go through, you may be able to solicit or promote your offering to, everyday people. But it, depending on another regulation you may choose that makes more sense for your company, then you might only be able to target accredited investors. And that just depends on which path you take. And I do have a white paper and all this information on my website. So if anybody is interested in learning more about these regulatory pathways, you no need to take notes today. You can just go visit.
I'm pretty excited.
Yeah. You don't need to.
That's cool. That's interesting. If I could ask a sort of a little
Sure.
switching gears here for 1 second. What I'm also interested in is, so you started this fund, and I always, I've actually had a number of people lately. I don't know, some of them are ex-founders, so they have like disposable capital because they exited or whatever, and then they're kind of looking for opportunities. And sometimes they say they want to do these, I think they're called like run-up businesses, or like, I can't remember what it's called, but basically you buy up a bunch of businesses in a market, and then you try to like add scale to them, and then you squeeze out sort of like this margin, and it makes a healthy profit margin, or you turn it around and sell it because it's more efficient and it's better and it's more profitable, to the next investor 5 years later. And I guess I wonder, have you seen like a ton of that in the market in general? And then for you specifically, and this is sort of related, how did you like start your own fund? Like, is it just because of the nature of the contacts you had? You could turn around and be like, hey, I think you work at Lehman Brothers, right? Like, can you hook me up with some dough to start this thing? And they're like, yeah, of course, we trust you, that kind of thing. Like, how did this happen?
So, yeah, that's a great question. So, so this fund, Particle is not a fund. It's it's a solution to help raise cash.
Sorry, you're
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not there. But in terms of your question about, do you see roll-ups happening and do you see acquisitions happening, and where that is coming into it, I think that I am seeing that the Canadian space is prime to get picked up because there's a lot of innovative companies out there who have amazing operational efficiencies, who have incredible profits, but are not getting any love because of the strength of our dollar.
Right.
And the lack of opportunities the country is currently kind of providing to help fund innovation. And I know we're not going to get into politics here because
that's
part of
it.
Yeah.
It just makes me wonder why you hate Canada.
I love Canada. I love Canada. I love Canada. There's nothing wrong with Canada or anything else like that. But I think, without getting, we don't want to cross any taboo things, but, it's, I hope that as we move forward as a country, we will really do better to help our entrepreneurs and our startups achieve their goals. And I think that, there's a lot of different ways you can do that, but I'd like to see more of that as, the country moves forward. And we need that to remain competitive on a global marketplace as well. But as you mentioned early, really well and very smart. So is that there's a currency exchange, right? So yeah, like there is a lot of traction, right? There could, I can see a lot of that because of the big disparity in there. But what I would love to see more is more support for entrepreneurs, more support for companies, and Particle can help with that by connecting companies with growth capital. So we can do that through the private markets, and that's one way we can tackle it. But I don't hate Canada.
Okay. That's good news. Otherwise, you have to just stop recording right now.
No, not at all.
Just flush this episode.
Yeah, no, not at all.
But one last thing there, though, too, is how did you get your like company going then? Not a fund, I guess. Apologies, I misspoke there, but I kind of mean like, how did you like? How do you get the credibility? Oh, hello. These are cool glasses. Very nice. That's when you're serious.
I am. It's a serious conversation now.
Yeah, the serious glasses. So how did you get specifically, how did you get yours off the ground?
For sure. So for me, I had an exit on a previous company, and then I actually, saw that this need was there because of my own hardship in there, and I met a bunch of like-minded people that we were able to kind of put this out into the world, and I think that actually goes to the strength of relationships,
Yeah.
and that's a major piece of it. One of the building relationships over time and getting out there and really valuing relationships is really a key piece of success in the future. And I don't think you can do that behind a computer all day. Like, I don't, I
Yeah.
don't think you can do it through just typing and posting. I think you have to go out there and make meaningful one-to-one connections so you can uncover the opportunities that are ahead of you. And whether that's kissing babies and shaking hands, or shaking babies and kissing hands, whatever works for you.
You're not supposed to shake babies.
Whatever works for you. You got to get out there and really be a facilitate that. And I think that that's the first thing. The second thing is you have to be open to opportunities.
Right.
And that means being able to evaluate them, to identify them, see them, be able to really see the value in it, but have a adventurous mindset. You need to take the risk, you need to take the adventure, and that goes hand in hand with relationship building. So to kind of answer your question, was a lot of it comes from the strength of relationships and getting out there and consistently nurturing these relationships over time. And because I'm not a spring chicken anymore, I've got a lot of those relationships that can help me out. Just some more time.
You have the network. I think that's a big deal for sure.
Yeah,
launching
for sure.
any venture, it's nice to have a solid network behind you.
Yes.
Get some of those early wins and kind of pave a little bit of that bumpy road early on.
So, and I just couldn't underscore the value of being able to go meet people and really spend time with them. Mm-hmm. And I think as founders, sometimes we're just so bogged down with the day-to-day and the work and managing what we have after work and everything else. So we kind of don't have the energy or don't feel, but I mean, you will get more in a lot of ways getting on a plane, going to a conference and really being there and really trying to meet people and really spending time with people, and you'll see that over time, how that pays off.
Right. And I guess, Jane, just because we're running low on time here and I want to make sure we get to it, we always ask our sort of like myth question. I'd love to know, obviously you've had a lot of success with multiple ventures here. Yeah. What is like one surprising thing or one sort of myth that you want to make sure our audience knows about today?
Great question. I think that a surprising myth is around sales. And
that's my forte. I love it.
Love it. I think that we have, as founders, we have this myth like, I don't need to do sales, or I can hire someone to do sales, or sales will magically appear. That could be furthest for the truth. Like, if you're not comfortable with sales, get comfortable and do it today, because nothing's going to happen until you create those founder-led sales, until you really truly understand your customer, until you're out there talking about it. And you could throw a ton of money out on that process if you just don't understand it right away. I know, like, back in when I was younger, I worked at ski shops because that's the way I got my ski gear, my pro discounts, and all that, and get all my ski lift passes. And actually, selling like really expensive skis taught me so much about that process, right? Like, and you have to know how to close. Have to know how to ask somebody if they want to participate. You have to know all these things. And you need to do that as soon as possible. So that's my biggest myth, is if you're a founder out there and you think that you're immune to sales, it's probably one of the most important things you got to do.
This is one of my favorites, actually. This is one of my favorite myths about business, because I know we've always said we're not a software company, we're a sales organization first. So
yeah, it's funny. We could have done the whole show on that. I would have loved to have talked about that. But anyway, that's cool. And, actually a long time ago, just on the one last thing before we go, is I actually used to sell shoes at a fabulous place called Sport Mart. And I had to sell about $2,000 of shoes. and about a 4-hour shift. So you want to, like, you talk about hustle, learning the products, knowing what to say, how to get, you just had to go through people quickly. And that was pretty fun. I actually really, really enjoyed that for a solid 6 months. Anyway, Jane, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It was wonderful talking with you. Folks, that's another episode of Startup Different. Thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we will recap this episode with Jane. We'll go deep on some of the business principles she mentioned. Until then, we will see you and have a wonderful rest of your day. Hey, you made it all the way to the end of the episode. Nicely done. If you enjoyed this episode, like, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so the almighty algorithm can help others find us. Want more from Startup Different? Check out our book, Startup Different, the myth-busting blueprint for your multi-million-dollar business. Follow us on social. We're big on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can also check us out at startupdifferent.com. Special thanks for this episode to Graham and our friends at Toronto Podcasts. Visit them at torontopodcast.ca. See you next week.